The Battle of Crécy 1346, a turning point in medieval warfare. Introduction. The Battle of Crécy, fought on August 26, 1346, stands as a pivotal moment in medieval European history. Occurring during the early phase of the Hundred Years' War, this battle was not just a significant military victory for the English forces under King Edward III, but also marked a transformative shift in the nature of warfare. The Battle of Crécy is often remembered for the dominance of the English longbowmen and the tactical brilliance of Edward III, but its significance extends far beyond these elements. It symbolized the decline of chivalric warfare, the erosion of feudal military systems, and the beginning of new strategies that would shape the future of European conflicts. Let's explore the causes, strategic decisions, the course of the battle, and its aftermath, while examining its long-term impact on medieval warfare and European political dynamics. The political context and causes of the Hundred Years' War. The Battle of Crécy cannot be fully understood without first examining the broader context of the Hundred Years' War. This prolonged conflict between England and France, which lasted from 1337 to 1453, was driven by deep-rooted feudal tensions, territorial disputes, and dynastic claims. The origins of the war can be traced back to the Norman conquest of England in 1066, when William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, became King of England. This event created a unique situation in which the English king was also a vassal of the French king, holding vast territories in France. Over the centuries, these dual allegiances led to numerous conflicts between the English and French crowns, as each sought to assert control over these lands. The immediate cause of the Hundred Years' War was the succession crisis following the death of Charles IV of France in 1328. Charles died without a male heir, leading to a dispute over the French throne. Edward III of England, whose mother, Isabella of France, was the daughter of Philip IV and sister of Charles IV, claimed the French crown through her lineage. However, the French nobility invoked the Salic law, which prohibited inheritance through the female line, and instead chose Philip VI, a cousin of Charles IV, as king. Edward's claim to the throne was rejected, leading to growing tensions between England and France. Territorial conflicts further strained relations between the two kingdoms. The English crown had long held significant territories in France, particularly the Duchy of Aquitaine, which had come into English hands through the marriage of Eleanor of Aquitaine to Henry II in the 12th century. These lands were a valuable source of wealth and power for the English monarchy, but they were also a point of contention with the French, who sought to reassert control over these territories. The desire to expand and consolidate power on both sides led to a series of military confrontations. The geopolitical landscape of 14th-century Europe also played a critical role in the outbreak of the Hundred Years' War. Both England and France were involved in complex alliances and rivalries with other European powers, including the Holy Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Castile, and various Italian city-states. These alliances often drew the two kingdoms into broader conflicts, further complicating their relationship. The papacy, which had significant political influence during this period, was also involved in the dispute, often acting as a mediator but also exacerbating tensions by favoring one side over the other. Economic factors also contributed to the conflict. The English crown relied heavily on the wool trade, particularly with Flanders, a region that was politically aligned with France but economically dependent on English wool. The desire to protect and expand trade interests led to frequent clashes between English and French forces, particularly in the English Channel and the ports of northern France. By the time of the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the Hundred Years' War had already been raging for nearly a decade. The war had been characterized by a series of English raids, known as chevauchées, into French territory. These raids were intended to weaken the French economy, disrupt their military efforts, and force the French king into a decisive battle on terms favorable to the English. Edward III, a shrewd and ambitious leader, sought to use these tactics to assert his claim to the French throne and secure English dominance in France. Prelude to the battle, the Crécy campaign. The Crécy campaign was a bold and ambitious military expedition launched by Edward III in the summer of 1346. Edward's goal was to strike deep into the heart of France, demonstrating English military prowess and weakening the French kingdom through a series of devastating raids. The campaign was part of a broader strategy to force the French king, Philip VI, into a pitched battle where the English could exploit their tactical advantages, particularly the use of the longbow. Edward's army, consisting of between 12,000 and 15,000 men, was a formidable force by the standards of the time. It included a mix of heavily armored knights, men-at-arms, and longbowmen. The longbowmen, who were the backbone of the English army, played a crucial role in Edward's strategy. The English longbow was a highly effective weapon, capable of firing arrows at a rapid rate and with considerable force, making it particularly effective against the heavily armored knights that formed the core of the French army. The English forces landed at Saint-Vaast-la-Hougue in Normandy on July 12, 1346. From the outset, Edward's strategy was aggressive and calculated. The English army moved rapidly through Normandy, sacking towns and villages, destroying crops, and looting resources. These actions were intended to disrupt the French economy and provoke the French king into battle. The speed and efficiency of the English campaign caught the French by surprise and forced Philip VI to hastily assemble his forces. As the English army advanced, Edward sought to bring the French king to battle. He moved his forces towards Paris, threatening the French capital and attempting to draw Philip VI out of his defensive position. Edward's goal was not to capture Paris, but to force the French king to engage in a battle on terms that favored the English. However, rather than continuing towards Paris, Edward turned his army northward, heading towards the coast, where he could secure a line of retreat if necessary. Philip VI, meanwhile, had managed to gather a large army, estimated at around 35,000 men. This force included some of the finest knights in France, as well as a significant contingent of Genoese crossbowmen, who were regarded as some of the best mercenaries in Europe. The French king's objective was to intercept and destroy the English army before it could reach the safety of the English Channel. The French pursued the English through northern France, determined to bring Edward to battle. The English army reached the River Somme in late August, where they found the bridges destroyed and the French army closing in. Faced with the prospect of being caught between the river and the advancing French forces, Edward made a daring decision. He ordered his men to ford the river at low tide, a risky maneuver that could have ended in disaster. However, the English successfully crossed the river, leaving the French on the opposite bank and gaining valuable time to prepare for the coming battle. Edward chose to make his stand near the village of Crécy-en-Ponthieu, a small but strategically important location on the road to Calais. The village was situated on a gentle slope, with the English army taking up a defensive position on the higher ground. This elevated position would prove to be a significant advantage for the English, as it allowed them to use their longbowmen to maximum effect while forcing the French to attack uphill. The decision to fight at Crécy was a calculated risk. The English army was significantly outnumbered by the French, but Edward believed that his troops were better disciplined, better organized, and better equipped to win a pitched battle. The stage was set for one of the most important battles of the 100 Years' War, a battle that would forever change the course of European history. The role of logistics and supply lines. Logistics and supply chains played a crucial role in medieval warfare, and the Battle of Crécy was no exception. The ability to sustain an army in the field, ensure a steady supply of food, weapons, and other essentials, and maintain communication lines was often as important as battlefield tactics. For both the English and French armies, managing these logistical challenges was a key factor in their overall strategies. Edward III's decision to invade France in 1346 was accompanied by careful logistical planning. The English forces, aware of the challenges of campaigning in enemy territory, prepared meticulously for the campaign. They brought with them supplies of food, weapons, and other necessary equipment, but they also relied heavily on the practice of foraging and raiding to sustain themselves. This was a common strategy in medieval warfare, where armies would plunder the countryside, seizing food, livestock, and other resources from local populations to sustain their campaign. This not only provided the necessary supplies but also weakened the enemy by depriving them of resources. The English army's rapid movement through Normandy, as they sacked towns and villages, was not just a tactic to provoke the French into battle, it was also a means of sustaining their forces. The chevauchée, or mounted raid, was a hallmark of English strategy during the 100 Years' War. It allowed the English to maintain their momentum and keep their forces supplied while avoiding the lengthy and vulnerable supply lines that had plagued many medieval armies. The ability to live off the land and disrupt the enemy's economy was a key advantage for the English and contributed to their success at Crécy. In contrast, the French army faced significant logistical challenges. Philip VI's forces, while numerically superior, were less mobile and more dependent on fixed supply lines. The French army was composed of heavily armored knights, infantry, and crossbowmen, all of whom required substantial supplies of food, water, and equipment. The rapid advance of the English forces forced the French to hastily gather their army and pursue them across northern France. This rapid mobilization strained the French supply lines and left them vulnerable to the kind of disruption that the English had been inflicting on the French countryside. The logistical difficulties faced by the French were exacerbated by the terrain and weather conditions. The muddy roads and swollen rivers of northern France made it difficult for the French to maintain their supply lines, and the need to feed and equip a large army on the move created additional challenges. The French also faced difficulties in coordinating their supply efforts, as the decentralized nature of the French feudal system meant that individual lords were responsible for supplying their own contingents. This lack of central coordination contributed to the disorganization and confusion that would later characterize the French assault at Crécy. The crossing of the River Somme by the English army is a prime example of how logistical considerations influenced the course of the campaign. The French had destroyed the bridges over the river in an attempt to trap the English against its banks, hoping to cut off their retreat and force them into a disadvantageous position. However, Edward III's decision to ford the river at low tide allowed the English to escape this trap and continue their advance. This maneuver not only demonstrated the flexibility and adaptability of the English forces but also highlighted the importance of logistics and local knowledge in medieval warfare. Overall, the English success at Crécy can be attributed in part to their superior logistical planning and execution. Their ability to sustain their army in enemy territory, disrupt the French supply lines, and adapt to the challenges of the campaign gave them a significant advantage over the French. In contrast, the logistical difficulties faced by the French contributed to their defeat, as they were unable to bring their full strength to bear against the English forces. The battlefield and deployment of forces. The battlefield at Crécy was carefully chosen by Edward III to maximize the strengths of his army and to minimize those of the French. The village of Crécy was located on a gentle slope, with the English army positioned on the higher ground. This elevated position gave the English a significant tactical advantage, as it allowed them to utilize their longbowmen to devastating effect and force the French to attack uphill, which would slow their advance and make them more vulnerable to the English arrows. The English army was arranged in 3 divisions, known as battles. Each division consisted of a mix of knights, men-at-arms, and longbowmen. The longbowmen, who were the key to the English strategy, were positioned in a protective arc in front of the men-at-arms and knights. This formation allowed the longbowmen to fire their arrows in a continuous barrage, while the men-at-arms and knights provided a solid defensive line behind them. The English archers were also protected by a series of sharpened stakes driven into the ground, which were intended to impede the advance of the French cavalry. The center of the English line was commanded by the Black Prince, Edward III's 16-year-old son, who was given a significant role in the battle despite his young age. This decision was a reflection of Edward's confidence in his son and in the discipline of his troops. The left and right flanks were commanded by seasoned knights, who were tasked with holding the line and preventing the French from outflanking the English position. Edward III himself took up a position in the rear, where he could oversee the battle and provide support where necessary. This was a common practice among medieval kings, who were expected to lead their armies but also needed to be in a position to direct the overall strategy of the battle. Edward's position allowed him to monitor the progress of the battle and to send reinforcements to any part of the line that came under heavy pressure. In contrast to the well-organized English forces, the French army was less disciplined and less well prepared for the battle. Philip VI, confident in his superior numbers, deployed his forces in a more traditional feudal formation, with the heavily armored knights forming the core of the attack. The French army was divided into several large divisions, each consisting of knights, men-at-arms, and crossbowmen. The French also employed a large contingent of Genoese crossbowmen, who were positioned in the front lines and tasked with softening up the English defences before the knights charged. However, the French deployment was hampered by the hurried nature of their march to Crécy and the lack of a clear strategy for dealing with the English longbowmen. The French knights, who were the backbone of the French army, were eager to charge the English lines and to engage in the kind of close combat in which they excelled. However, they were not well coordinated, and their attacks would ultimately be disjointed and ineffective. The Genoese crossbowmen, who were supposed to play a crucial role in the French strategy, were also at a disadvantage. They had marched a long distance to reach the battlefield and were exhausted by the time they arrived. Moreover, they had not been given sufficient time to prepare their weapons or to rest before the battle began. This lack of preparation would prove to be a critical factor in the outcome of the battle. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of two kingdoms. The English, with their well-organized and disciplined forces, were ready to defend their position and to exploit the advantages of the terrain. The French, with their superior numbers and their heavily armored knights, were determined to crush the English invaders and to end the threat posed by Edward III. The battle that followed would be one of the most significant engagements of the medieval period. The course of the battle. The Battle of Crécy began in the late afternoon of August 26, 1346. The French forces, eager to engage the English, initiated the battle with an advance by their Genoese crossbowmen. These crossbowmen were among the most feared mercenaries in Europe, known for their skill and discipline. However, as they moved forward to engage the English lines, they encountered unexpected difficulties. The Genoese crossbowmen were at a significant disadvantage for several reasons. First, they were exhausted from the long march to the battlefield, and their weapons had been affected by the heavy rain that had fallen earlier in the day. The wet conditions made it difficult for them to keep their crossbows dry and to properly maintain the tension required for firing. Additionally, the crossbowmen were not equipped with their protective pavesses, large shields that they would typically use to shield themselves while reloading. Without these shields, they were highly vulnerable to the English archers. As the Genoese advanced, the English longbowmen, positioned on the higher ground, unleashed a devastating volley of arrows. The longbow, with its rapid rate of fire and long range, was a formidable weapon. The English archers could fire up to 10 to 12 arrows per minute, creating a continuous and deadly barrage. The Genoese crossbowmen, unable to withstand the onslaught, quickly fell into disarray. Many were killed or wounded in the initial volley, and those who survived began to retreat in panic. The retreat of the Genoese crossbowmen created confusion and chaos within the French ranks. The French knights, who were eager to charge the English lines, were infuriated by what they perceived as cowardice on the part of the crossbowmen. Some of the knights even began to attack the fleeing Genoese, further adding to the disorganization within the French army. Despite the disarray, the French knights pressed forward with a series of cavalry charges against the English lines. These knights, heavily armored and mounted on powerful war horses, represented the elite of the French military. They were trained for close combat and expected to break through the English defenses with their sheer force. However, they were unprepared for the devastating effectiveness of the English longbowmen. As the French knights charged uphill towards the English lines, they were met with a continuous barrage of arrows. The English longbowmen targeted the horses as well as the knights, knowing that an armored knight was far less mobile and effective if dismounted. The muddy ground, combined with the uphill slope, further hindered the advance of the French cavalry. Many knights were unhorsed before they even reached the English lines, while others were killed or wounded by the arrows. The disciplined English men-at-arms and knights, positioned behind the longbowmen, held their ground against the French assaults. The English forces had been instructed to remain in their defensive positions and to allow the longbowmen to do the bulk of the fighting. This strategy proved highly effective, as the French knights, exhausted and demoralized by the repeated failures of their charges, were unable to break through the English defenses. The battle raged on into the evening, with the French launching repeated attacks against the English lines. Each time, they were met with the same devastating results. The French knights, who had entered the battle with confidence in their ability to crush the English, found themselves increasingly frustrated and demoralized. The sight of their comrades falling under the relentless hail of arrows, combined with the inability to reach the English lines, took a heavy toll on their morale. The turning point of the battle came when King Philip VI, who had been personally leading the French forces in the front lines, was wounded and forced to retreat. The sight of their king retreating from the battlefield was a devastating blow to the French forces. The French army, already disorganized and demoralized, began to collapse into a full-scale rout. The English, sensing victory, pursued the fleeing French, inflicting further casualties and capturing numerous prisoners. By the end of the day, the French army had been shattered, and the English had won a decisive victory. The Battle of Crécy was over, and the English forces stood triumphant on the battlefield. The scale of the French defeat was staggering, with thousands of knights, men-at-arms, and crossbowmen killed or captured. Among the dead were several high-ranking members of the French nobility, including Charles II of Alençon, the brother of Philip VI, and the blind King John of Bohemia, who had fought valiantly despite his disability. The Battle of Crécy was a turning point in the 100 Years' War, and its outcome would have profound implications for both England and France. Reasons for the English victory. The English victory at Crécy was not simply the result of luck or the superiority of one side over the other. It was the product of a combination of factors, including strategic planning, tactical innovation, discipline, and leadership. Several key reasons contributed to the English success at Crécy, each of which played a crucial role in determining the outcome of the battle. First and foremost, the effectiveness of the English longbow cannot be overstated. The longbow was a revolutionary weapon that gave the English a significant advantage over their French counterparts. Its long range, rapid rate of fire, and ability to penetrate armor made it a formidable tool on the battlefield. The longbowmen at Crécy were well-trained and highly disciplined, able to maintain a continuous barrage of arrows that decimated the French forces. The strategic positioning of the longbowmen on higher ground, combined with their protection behind stakes, allowed them to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing their vulnerability to enemy attacks. The discipline and organization of the English forces were also critical to their victory. Edward III had carefully organized his army into 3 divisions, each with a clear role and position on the battlefield. The English troops were well trained and followed their orders with precision, maintaining their defensive positions even in the face of repeated French charges. This discipline was in stark contrast to the disorganization and lack of coordination within the French ranks, where conflicting orders and the eagerness of the knights to engage in combat led to disjointed and ineffective attacks. Leadership played a crucial role in the English victory at Crécy. Edward III's decision to choose the battlefield at Crécy, his organization of the army, and his ability to maintain discipline among his troops were instrumental in securing victory. Edward demonstrated a keen understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of both his own forces and those of the French. His strategy of forcing the French to attack uphill, where their cavalry charges were less effective, was a masterstroke that played a significant role in the outcome of the battle. Moreover, Edward's decision to delegate command of the Centre Division to his son, the Black Prince, showed confidence in his troops and allowed him to focus on the overall direction of the battle. The disorganization and overconfidence of the French were also significant factors in their defeat. The French forces were poorly coordinated, with conflicting orders and a lack of a clear strategy for dealing with the English longbowmen. The decision to attack in waves, without waiting for the entire army to assemble, led to disjointed and ineffective assaults on the English positions. The French knights, who were the backbone of the French army, were unable to adapt to the new tactics employed by the English, and their traditional reliance on cavalry charges proved to be their undoing. Finally, the terrain and weather conditions favored the English. The muddy ground, combined with the uphill slope, hindered the mobility of the French knights and made them more vulnerable to the English archers. The heavy rain that fell during the battle also affected the effectiveness of the Genoese crossbowmen, whose crossbows became less effective in the wet conditions. The English, who were better prepared and better positioned, were able to take full advantage of these factors to secure their victory. The English victory at Crécy was a result of careful planning, disciplined execution, and the effective use of new military technologies and tactics. It was a triumph that would have far-reaching consequences for both England and France, and for the future of medieval warfare. Aftermath and immediate consequences. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Crécy was disastrous for the French. The French nobility suffered heavy casualties, with many prominent knights and nobles killed or captured. Among the dead were several high-ranking members of the French aristocracy, including Charles II of Alençon, the brother of Philip VI, and the blind King John of Bohemia, who had fought valiantly despite his disability. The loss of so many experienced leaders weakened the French military and contributed to a period of internal strife and instability. For England, the victory at Crécy was a significant morale boost and solidified Edward III's reputation as a capable military leader. The battle also demonstrated the effectiveness of the English longbow, which would continue to be a key weapon in subsequent battles of the 100 Years' War. The victory at Crécy allowed Edward III to continue his campaign in northern France, and he soon laid siege to the strategically important port of Calais. The siege of Calais, which lasted for nearly a year, eventually resulted in the capture of the city in 1347, providing England with a valuable foothold in France and a base for future military operations. The Battle of Crécy also had broader implications for the 100 Years' War. The English victory demonstrated that a smaller, well-disciplined army could defeat a larger force through superior tactics and technology. This lesson was not lost on other European powers, who began to adopt similar tactics and reforms in their own armies. The battle also marked the beginning of a shift in the balance of power in Europe, with England emerging as a major military and political force. The defeat at Crécy was a severe blow to French morale and prestige. The loss of so many prominent nobles, combined with the failure of the French military to defeat the English, led to a period of internal instability and power struggles within France. The French king, Philip VI, was criticized for his handling of the battle, and his authority was weakened as a result. The defeat also exposed the weaknesses of the French feudal system, where individual lords acted independently rather than as a cohesive force under the king's command. This lack of coordination and unity would continue to plague the French military throughout the 100 Years' War. The victory at Crécy also had significant financial implications for both England and France. The cost of the war was enormous, and the heavy casualties suffered by the French nobility led to a decline in revenue from feudal dues and taxes. The English, on the other hand, benefited from the ransom of captured French nobles and the spoils of war, which provided much-needed funds for the continuation of the war effort. The capture of Calais, a major port and trading hub, also provided England with a valuable source of income and a strategic base for future operations. In addition to its immediate military and political consequences, the Battle of Crécy had a lasting impact on the development of European warfare. The success of the English longbowmen at Crécy demonstrated the effectiveness of infantry and ranged weapons in medieval warfare, challenging the dominance of the heavily armored knight. The battle also highlighted the importance of discipline, organization, and leadership in determining the outcome of a battle. These lessons would be learned and applied by other European powers in the years to come, leading to significant changes in military tactics and the organization of armies. Diplomatic maneuvering and international reactions. The Battle of Crécy did not occur in isolation. It was part of a broader geopolitical context that involved not only England and France, but also other European powers. The outcome of the battle had significant diplomatic repercussions, influencing the relationships and alliances that shaped the course of the Hundred Years' War and the broader political landscape of 14th-century Europe. In the years leading up to the Battle of Crécy, both England and France had engaged in extensive diplomatic maneuvering to secure allies and isolate their enemies. Edward III, in particular, had sought to build a coalition of allies to support his claim to the French throne. He secured the support of the Flemish cities, which were economically dependent on English wool and had a vested interest in maintaining good relations with England. The Flemish cities provided financial and military support to the English cause, and their alliance with Edward III was a significant factor in the early successes of the English campaign. Edward also sought to secure the support of the Holy Roman Emperor, Louis IV, by entering into negotiations for a potential alliance. Although these negotiations did not result in a formal alliance, they did serve to neutralize the threat of imperial intervention on the side of France. Edward's diplomatic efforts extended to other European powers as well, including the Kingdom of Portugal and the Kingdom of Aragon, both of which had their own interests in the conflict and were potential allies in the struggle against France. Philip VI of France, meanwhile, worked to secure the support of his own allies, including the Kingdom of Scotland, which had a long-standing alliance with France through the Old Alliance. The Scottish threat to England's northern border was a constant concern for Edward III, and Philip VI sought to exploit this by encouraging Scottish raids into northern England. However, the Scots were unable to provide significant military support to the French at Crécy, as they were preoccupied with their own struggles against the English in the north. The international reactions to the Battle of Crécy were mixed. The English victory was celebrated by Edward III's allies, particularly in Flanders, where the success at Crécy was seen as a vindication of their alliance with England. The Flemish cities, which had been under pressure from the French, saw the English victory as a boost to their own security and economic interests. The victory also enhanced Edward III's reputation as a military leader and strengthened his position in negotiations with other European powers. In France, the defeat at Crécy was a severe blow to the prestige of the French crown and led to a period of political instability. Philip VI faced criticism from within his own court for his handling of the battle, and the loss of so many prominent nobles further weakened his authority. The French defeat also emboldened Edward III to pursue his claim to the French throne more aggressively, leading to a renewed phase of the Hundred Years' War. The battle also had an impact on the broader diplomatic landscape of Europe. Other European powers, including the Holy Roman Empire, the Kingdom of Castile, and the Italian city-states, took note of the English victory and the effectiveness of their military tactics. The success of the longbowmen at Crécy, in particular, attracted the attention of military leaders across Europe, leading to a re-evaluation of the role of infantry and ranged weapons in medieval warfare. The battle also served as a reminder of the importance of alliances and diplomatic maneuvering in determining the outcome of military conflicts. In the years following the Battle of Crécy, both England and France continued to engage in diplomatic efforts to secure allies and gain an advantage in the ongoing conflict. The shifting alliances and rivalries of the period would continue to shape the course of the Hundred Years' War and the broader political landscape of Europe. The social and economic impact on England and France. The Battle of Crécy had far-reaching social and economic consequences for both England and France, extending beyond the immediate military and political outcomes of the battle. The war, and particularly the victory at Crécy, had a profound impact on the economies of both nations, as well as on the lives of ordinary people. In England, the victory at Crécy was a significant boost to national morale and helped to solidify support for Edward III's military campaigns. The success of the English army, particularly the longbowmen, became a source of national pride and contributed to the development of a distinct English identity. The longbow, which had played such a crucial role in the victory, became a symbol of English military prowess and was celebrated in literature, art, and popular culture. The economic impact of the war on England was also significant. The cost of waging war in France was enormous, and the English crown was forced to raise taxes and borrow heavily to finance the campaign. However, the victory at Crécy and the subsequent capture of Calais provided England with valuable resources that helped to offset the costs of the war. The ransom of captured French nobles, the looting of French towns, and the control of the port of Calais all provided much-needed revenue for the English crown. The war also had a profound impact on English society. The recruitment of soldiers for the campaign in France, particularly the longbowmen, drew men from all walks of life, including peasants, artisans, and yeomen. The experience of serving in the army and fighting in France helped to break down some of the social barriers that existed in medieval England, as men from different social classes fought side by side. The war also contributed to the decline of the feudal system, as the need for a professional standing army began to replace the traditional reliance on feudal levies. In France, the defeat at Crécy had a devastating impact on the economy and society. The loss of so many prominent nobles, combined with the destruction wrought by the English chevauchés, weakened the French economy and led to a period of economic hardship. The war disrupted trade and agriculture, leading to shortages of food and other essential goods. The destruction of towns and villages by the English army also displaced large numbers of people, contributing to social unrest and instability. The defeat at Crécy also had a profound impact on the French nobility. The loss of so many prominent knights and nobles, including members of the royal family, created a power vacuum that led to internal strife and conflict. The French crown, already weakened by the defeat, struggled to maintain control over its vassals, leading to a period of political instability and civil war. The defeat also exposed the weaknesses of the French feudal system, where the lack of central authority and coordination contributed to the disorganization and confusion that plagued the French army at Crécy. The economic impact of the war on France was compounded by the need to pay ransoms for captured nobles and to finance the ongoing war effort. The French crown was forced to raise taxes and impose new levies on its subjects, leading to widespread discontent and unrest. The war also contributed to the decline of the French economy, as the destruction of towns, villages, and farmland by the English army led to a decline in agricultural production and trade. The social and economic impact of the Battle of Crécy was felt not only in England and France but also in other parts of Europe. The war disrupted trade routes and markets, leading to economic hardship in regions that were dependent on trade with England and France. The influx of soldiers and refugees from the war also contributed to social unrest and instability in neighboring regions. The evolution of military strategy post-Crécy. The Battle of Crécy marked a turning point in the evolution of military strategy in medieval Europe. The success of the English longbowmen and the failure of the traditional cavalry charge at Crécy led to a re-evaluation of military tactics and the role of different types of troops on the battlefield. The lessons learned at Crécy would influence the development of military strategy in subsequent battles of the Hundred Years' War and beyond. One of the most significant changes in military strategy following the Battle of Crécy was the increased emphasis on infantry and ranged weapons. The effectiveness of the English longbowmen at Crécy demonstrated that infantry armed with ranged weapons could decisively influence the outcome of a battle, even against heavily armored knights. This lesson was not lost on other European powers, who began to invest more in training and equipping infantry troops. The decline of the traditional cavalry charge, which had been the dominant tactic in European warfare for centuries, was another key development following the Battle of Crécy. The failure of the French knights to break through the English lines at Crécy highlighted the limitations of relying solely on cavalry in battle. The effectiveness of the longbowmen and the defensive position taken by the English at Crécy demonstrated that a well-organized and disciplined infantry could withstand and even repel cavalry charges. This realization led to a shift in military strategy, with greater emphasis placed on combined arms tactics that integrated infantry, cavalry, and ranged weapons. The Battle of Crécy also influenced the development of battlefield tactics and formations. The English use of the longbowmen in a protective arc in front of the men-at-arms and knights, combined with the use of stakes to impede cavalry charges, was a key factor in their success at Crécy. This tactic, which became known as the English position, was later used in other battles of the 100 Years' War, including the Battle of Poitiers and the Battle of Agincourt. The use of terrain to gain a tactical advantage, as seen at Crécy, also became an important consideration in military strategy. The impact of the Battle of Crécy on military strategy extended beyond the battlefield. The success of the English army at Crécy led to changes in military training and organization. The English longbowmen, who had proven so effective at Crécy, became a central component of the English military, with increased investment in archery training and the production of longbows. The need for a more professional and disciplined army also contributed to the decline of the feudal levy system and the rise of professional standing armies in Europe. The lessons learned at Crécy also influenced the development of fortifications and siege tactics. The effectiveness of ranged weapons in open battle led to changes in the design of fortifications, with greater emphasis placed on defense against artillery and ranged attacks. The need to protect against longbowmen and other ranged weapons led to the development of stronger and more complex fortifications, with thicker walls, higher towers, and improved defensive positions. The Battle of Crécy also had an impact on naval warfare, as the success of the English army on land was complemented by their control of the English Channel. The ability to project power across the Channel and to disrupt French trade and supply lines was a key factor in the English success during the 100 Years' War. The lessons learned at Crécy influenced the development of naval tactics and the importance of maintaining control of key waterways in medieval warfare. Comparative analysis with other key battles. The Battle of Crécy is often compared to other significant battles of the 100 Years' War, including the Battle of Poitiers, 1356, and the Battle of Agincourt, 1415. These battles, like Crécy, were decisive victories for the English and demonstrated the effectiveness of the longbowmen and the tactical innovations introduced by the English army. The Battle of Poitiers, fought 10 years after Crécy, was in many ways a continuation of the lessons learned at Crécy. The English army, led by Edward, the Black Prince, employed similar tactics to those used at Crécy, including the use of longbowmen in a defensive position and the careful selection of terrain. The French army, despite being numerically superior, was once again unable to break through the English lines, and the battle ended in a decisive English victory. The capture of the French king, John II, at Poitiers further weakened the French crown and led to a period of internal strife and instability in France. The Battle of Agincourt, fought in 1415, is perhaps the most famous of the three battles and is often seen as the culmination of the tactical innovations introduced at Crécy. The English army, led by Henry V, faced a French force that was numerically superior and composed of heavily armored knights. However, the English once again used the longbowmen to devastating effect, with the French cavalry charges repeatedly repelled by the English defensive position. The muddy terrain and the exhaustion of the French troops further contributed to their defeat, and the battle ended in a catastrophic loss for the French. The victory at Agincourt solidified the reputation of the English longbowmen and the effectiveness of the English military tactics developed during the 100 Years' War. When comparing these battles, it is clear that the Battle of Crécy set the stage for the later successes of the English army. The use of longbowmen, the emphasis on discipline and organization, and the careful selection of terrain were all tactics that were refined and perfected in the years following Crécy. The continuity of these tactics in subsequent battles highlights the importance of Crécy as a turning point in medieval warfare. However, there were also significant differences between these battles. The political and social contexts of each battle were different, and the outcomes of the battles had varying impacts on the course of the 100 Years' War. For example, the capture of the French king at Poitiers led to a period of relative peace, while the victory at Agincourt was followed by a renewed phase of the war. The differences in the size and composition of the armies, as well as the terrain and weather conditions, also influenced the outcomes of the battles. Overall, the comparative analysis of the Battle of Crécy with other key battles of the 100 Years' War highlights the importance of innovation, discipline, and tactical planning in determining the outcome of medieval battles. The lessons learned at Crécy continued to influence military strategy and tactics for centuries to come. Cultural and literary depictions of the battle. The Battle of Crécy has been depicted in numerous works of literature, art, and popular culture, and these depictions have played a significant role in shaping the historical memory of the battle. The battle has been celebrated as a great English victory, a symbol of national pride, and a turning point in medieval warfare. In English literature, the Battle of Crécy is often portrayed as a heroic struggle between the outnumbered English forces and the mighty French army. The longbowmen, in particular, are celebrated as the heroes of the battle, their skill and discipline allowing them to overcome the heavily armored French knights. This portrayal can be seen in works such as The Chronicles by Jean Froissart, a contemporary account of the 100 Years' War that praises the English victory at Crécy and the role of the longbowmen. The battle has also been depicted in art, with numerous paintings and illustrations depicting the clash between the English and French forces. These depictions often emphasize the bravery and skill of the English soldiers, as well as the chaos and confusion of the French defeat. The imagery of the longbowmen, with their powerful bows and deadly arrows, has become a symbol of English military prowess and has been used in various forms of visual art to celebrate the victory at Crécy. In popular culture, the Battle of Crécy has been the subject of numerous books, films, and television programs. These portrayals often focus on the dramatic elements of the battle, the clash between the two armies, and the triumph of the underdog English forces. The battle has also been used as a backdrop for fictional stories, with characters and events from the battle woven into larger narratives about the 100 Years' War. The cultural depictions of the Battle of Crécy have played a significant role in shaping the historical memory of the battle. In England, the battle is often remembered as a great victory and a symbol of national pride, with the longbowmen celebrated as national heroes. In France, the battle is remembered as a humiliating defeat, a symbol of the challenges facing the French feudal system, and a reminder of the need for military and political reform. The cultural legacy of the Battle of Crécy extends beyond England and France. The battle is often cited as a turning point in the history of medieval warfare and is studied by military historians and scholars around the world. The lessons learned at Crécy, the innovations in military tactics, and the decline of the knightly class have all contributed to the broader understanding of the evolution of warfare in Europe. Conclusion. The Battle of Crécy was a pivotal moment in the 100 Years' War and a turning point in the history of medieval Europe. The battle demonstrated the effectiveness of new military technologies and tactics, particularly the use of the longbow, and marked the beginning of the end for the dominance of heavily armored cavalry on the battlefield. The English victory at Crécy had profound implications for the future of the 100 Years' War and the broader socio-political landscape of medieval Europe. The battle also had a lasting legacy, influencing the development of military technology and tactics, and shaping the course of European history for centuries to come. The Battle of Crécy was not just a military triumph for England, it was a moment that changed the trajectory of medieval warfare and reshaped the power dynamics of Europe. The lessons learned at Crécy, the innovations in military tactics, and the decline of the knightly class all contributed to the evolution of warfare and the emergence of new social and political structures in Europe. As we look back on the Battle of Crécy, we see not just a battle between two armies, but a turning point in history that would have lasting consequences for the world. Thanks for listening. Like and comment. And please subscribe, as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066. Stay curious.